Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the bench. Today, we're going to take a look at this Elceram Oxide 1/8 ESC. This guy is in my Techno EV48 2.2. I've got a little bit of a new camera setup here we're going to try. And I'll have a little bit of a new audio setup too. So let me know how it goes. Let's jump right into it. Just to give you a bit of a high level overview of what this thing does. It's a speed controller, right? If you're familiar with RC racing or RC bashing, any of that stuff, this is the thing that makes your motor go, right? Connects to your battery, connects to your motor, does all the magic in between, right? This one is a little bit interesting because the reason that I went after it, right, was because they have a bunch of protections in place. They say within the ESC that will prevent, say you have a failed sensor in your motor. I've had issues in the past where a failed sensor would actually fry the ESC, and that's not okay. So what these guys have done is put some protections in place. So in the case that you have a bad sensor on your motor, the ESC will kind of ignore that input and not, cook itself as a result of the bad sensor. We'll see if that works. I don't really know how to test it without, putting what I know is a failed motor on it. I don't really want to do that if I don't have to, but I might test it at some point. We'll see. If I do, I'll be sure to video. um, the other things that I was really interested in with this ESC, so there's protection from the sensor, as I mentioned. There's also protection from the battery, reverse polarity. If you use the cap pack, like the provided cap pack, which I have actually not soldered into this one, the cap pack will fry if you plug the battery up backwards, but the ESC will protect itself. It will not fry if you plug the battery in backwards. I will not test that here today. That seems like one of those things that you don't ever want to test unless you do it by accident, right? So I'll leave that one alone. The other two kind of things that I was really interested in with this ESC is the cooling functionality of it, and the temperature limits and things like that it has for its safety. Default on this thing, temperature for the ESC is 256 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the shutoff temperature for the ESC, which is pretty high. I kind of worry about whether or not that's too high, but I also have run across the limit and seen how it kind of behaves when you come across it, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. So there's the heat and the cooling kind of aspect of this ESC is interesting because it does not have a fan, you see. It does have an aluminum oxide plate on the bottom of the speed controller, which you cannot see here, but trust it's there. The trouble with it is mounted directly to tape, right? It's connected to tape and then taped to the ESC tray in my car. Not the best solution, I would say, for cooling, to have, all of the surface area on your cooling fin or your heatsink be covered by double-sided tape, which I would think would be pretty insulating. As there's some meat to it and that kind of stuff. And I would think that you would not want anything insulating up against your heatsink. You want that heatsink to pass as much heat as you possibly can. So what I found is I'm here in Texas, All right, Thornhill is where we film and is my home track. What I found is without a fan, I will hit the thermal protection pretty quickly. I can't make more than maybe 7.5 minutes or so without thermaling with no fan here in this Texas heat. You might be able to get away with it in other places. I'm not entirely sure, but certainly for me, I could not. Right, I had to put a fan invariably. Absolutely necessary. So that's what this is. My little ProTech 30 millimeter fan absolutely does the trick. I mean, I don't really understand the thinking here. I don't know if they really had, the Texas market in mind when it was being designed. It does, regularly get to be over 100 degrees and, 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and, high temperatures on speed controllers and batteries and motors and all those things are pretty common. And that's also the reason I have a fan on my motor too. For now, both of these fans are actually disconnected from the receiver because I'd like things nice and quiet for this little demo we're going to do. So let's go into the kind of demo here. And as we go, I'll kind of give some thoughts. And in the end, I'll try to give a little bit of a wrap up and kind of what I think, right? So this is Elceram Oxide. You power it on, you go right to like sort of a status screen. The screen is actually customizable. And we'll get into that as we dive into the settings pages and things like that. Anything that you see in any of these settings pages, any of the data sheets, almost every time you see a blue text, that is updated live. Okay. So for right now, I have my radio turned on, my car turned on. You can see my radio's on. Now, if I give it a little bit of throttle, you'll see these numbers start to change. So the top number will show you the amount of throttle you're on. That's the number here underneath the blinky section, and we'll talk a little bit about that too in a moment. So first is your throttle position, and then the second number is your current the current utilization by the ESC. So what current is passing through the ESC right now? You'll see it changes as I give it a little bit of gas. And you can see the throttle input changes too. Good stuff. As we go a little bit further, you can start to see some more information around what's going on. And again, all these blue numbers updated on the fly. Right now, no current going through, but if I give a little bit of throttle, it goes. It also tells you which sensor which sensor wire we're hitting, right, as you go. Very cool stuff. It shows you the revs. It'll show you the live spec voltage, your average RPMs. Let's go back to the main page there. And from here, you can get into data. There's next screen shows you live data on your battery voltage, BEC, your motor temperature, your ESC temperature, and then the current going through the ESC. You can reset these numbers min-max. So also on the next screen, you get your graphs. And so these have all kind of data around, the last however long you've configured in the ESC to maintain data. So you'll see fully the RPMs chart, right, over time. And This scale changes and so on. This timeline is configurable. We'll get into that. And then from this screen, you can just hit settings button to go next. It'll show you a battery graph, and that's a graph of what the voltage is coming in from the outside. Your Beck graph, this shows you all the fluctuations in your Beck. To be honest with you, I run my Beck around 7.8 volts, and I have never seen any real blip. Just a little bit off the line. That's really it. Solid. From there, there's a throttle input graph, and you can actually see my throttle inputs as we go. And there's a full throttle input and a full brake. From there, there's a current graph. Again, shows you over time the amount of current passed through the ESC. And then the temperatures for both the core and the caps on the ESC. This is interesting information because these numbers diverge, and the caps are probably the more important thing to worry about. Just something to keep an eye on. This is how you do it. I've never seen an ESC that allowed you to actually see the temperature that the capacitors were at, as well as the core ESC temperature. I thought that was very interesting. There's a chart for motor temperature. Obviously, this thing is just sitting here. It's not doing anything. If I took it out on the track, there would be some data here. There's an RPM chart. That's the first one. So we're back to the beginning. The next screen will show you histograms over time of these same sort of things, and you can use this information, for yourself as you go. You'll see a full throttle input histogram, full acceleration, your RPM chart, and then back to the full throttle. The next screen from here is what they call the history screen. It shows you motor runtime and rotations, and the max temperature it's seen and the max current it's seen. I'm not sure how these are reset. I'm going to have to come back to that and see. It might take a reset somewhere else. We'll find out. There's also a maintenance page on the kind of informational section of this ESC. I guess you could break that down. So everything that we've seen so far has been kind of the informational parts of the ESC, where you see data, right? You can't really interact with data. You can't change settings and all that kind of stuff. It's really informational. But it's everything that you ever want to know about the ESC, right? So there's this maintenance screen. This maintenance screen is configurable, and we'll get into that on kind of the back end. But you can actually configure different types of maintenance. So if I want to say diffs, bearings, shock oils, right? I can specify each of these things as items that I want to track for maintenance purposes. And the ESC will keep track of motor rotations and things of that nature to create a distance metric, right? And you would say, I want, X distance. I want to service my bearings. Remind me. And when you go out and you go make your next practice and say you cross that threshold, the ESC will actually throw an alert and say, hey, you should probably change your bearings because you told me that you wanted to change your bearings after such and such a distance. Very cool stuff. I've never seen anything like it in an ESC before. I would highlight this as something differentiating for sure. The ability to track these kind of things across cars is sometimes, a pain in the butt if you don't, use things like a notebook. I don't use a notebook, generally speaking. Sometimes I write down, oils and things like that on the car, and a lot of times it's just in my head. And I do some of those things kind of by feel too. So I don't, necessarily care what the numbers or or want to remember them because maybe in the future I might hate it. So um, yeah, it's really nice to have this functionality in place. I'm gonna play with it and get to a place where I understand it, and maybe we can do some of that here as I dive into the settings. So that's it for the maintenance section. The next is events, and events will show you anytime you lose. Here's a great example. I will turn off my radio, and you'll see an event. Receiver is still powered on. Yes, powered off, please. Boom, there's an event. No RX signal. And every so often that event repeats, and you'll start to see it an increment over here. Basically, every time it saw that event. Now, when I turn the radio back on, I don't believe it'll show an event for bringing the signal back, but it will when it goes down again. So if I turn it back off, you should see another event there. Turn the radio back off. Wait, maybe I have to give it a little bit of gas or something. Yes, please. Turn it off. Yeah, there should be another item here. Now maybe that doesn't update on the fly. Oh, it does actually. So yeah, already there's more than 99 entries for no RX signal. If there's other problems, thermals, or thermals on the ESC, or thermals on a motor, those would show up here, and you'll see when you hit that time, or a time for when you hit that alert, right? This is 8 minutes and 45 seconds after I started the ESC, so it's telling me that after 8 minutes 45 seconds, I lost the radio. Great. And then we did a bunch of stuff afterwards and turned it off and back on again a few times, and so we get this. Yeah, you'll see other errors and things like that here. And this will take us back to the main page. From the main page, if you want to get into the settings screen, there are these two buttons over here. They're typically left and right, but if you hold them both down for 2 seconds, you'll get the configuration menu. That's kind of like what you use for configuring your drive frequency, brakes, those kind of things. If you hold it down for 4 seconds, you will get into the sort of underbelly configuration of the ESC, where you can control things like how much data you record and things like that. So let's jump into this number 2. Hold these for 2 seconds. Screen updates, and it'll take you to the throttle configuration screen. I'll kind of tell you the information on the screen and kind of what I've set it to, and I won't give you any guidance right now on how to set it up for yourself. This is all going to be a kind of personal preference and feel kind of thing. So from the throttle page, you can set your drive frequency, your PWM. The stock is 8 kilohertz. I like to run a much higher PWM frequency on my Hobbywing gear because it smooths things out for me. But if I run a higher frequency on this ESC, it does create a lot of heat. So I haven't really needed to go to a higher frequency on this PWM setting, and the reason is because this ESC is smoother than anything else. With 9K on this ESC is much smoother, almost, than 20K on my Hobbywing. Even with the throttle response at 0 and the Expo at 0, it's just buttery. I added a little bit less response and a little bit of negative Expo just for a feel for me kind of thing. But I don't know if it's necessary. Like, out of the box, it feels great. They did a great job with this ESC and the feel of it. It's just something else. I actually gave this car to a couple of the pro guys here at Thornhill and let them drive it, and they said the same thing. In fact, one of them was like, I think I might buy one of these, right? So he was into it. He was like, that was, the smoothest ESC I've ever driven. And, I, at the time, I hadn't changed hardly any settings. So take that for what it's worth. If you want to edit these settings, you just hold this button down, and then you'll see the setting that you want to change flashing. You can update these by 0.1 kilohertz, and that PWM frequency goes all the way up to 45 kilohertz. I don't know if I would ever run 45 on 4S. That would probably cook the ESC. We were at 9, but it'll go down as low as what, 1? Yeah, we can go down as low as 1 or as high as 45. We had ours at 8 or 9 rather. So we'll go right to 9. Mm-hmm. All right, and then to enter, you just press the center button there, and that'll take you to the expo setting, and then you can set your expo however you like, and your response however you like. And that blue is just an indicator of how much throttle is on right now. Right, and of course my radio is off, so no throttle is on right now. So if I give it a little bit of throttle, you'll see the throttle. On the next page, we'll get to the brakes. I changed 2 things on this screen. My max brake, I've moved down to 85%, and I gave it a little bit of negative expo, only just to smooth out the brakes a little bit. They were a little bit stiff out of the box, but otherwise, all goodness. And again, there's this blue indicator here letting you know how much brake you've applied on your radio. I won't go through these settings. They should be, fairly straightforward, with the exception of the park brake. I believe that this is that you would just hold, when you hold your brake wide open, it leaves it locked on, versus say you're on a hill, right? And you want to have your car stop on the hill, you press the brake, and if you want it to hold there, you just leave your finger on the brake, right? But some speed controllers don't actually hold the brake. They'll let it go after a certain time. So I think this is your park brake setting there, and I'm gonna have to play with this one just to be sure. Your reverse setup, this is a race car. We don't use reverse in any case, so I have no reverse anything here. I imagine it's pretty straightforward, right? You just have your reverse activation, deactivation. I guess those are where the reverse picks up in the throttle range, and then the power associated with how fast you go in reverse. I just run it in forward brake, and reverse is off. Next is boost. I don't run any boost in any case, but the ESC lets you do a bunch of cool things here if you are, somebody who runs boost, or would like to run boost. I want to spend some time with boost timing on this, because I do think it's interesting. I think there's some things that we could do on the track that might make us faster. I think there's probably a world of time to be made up in here. I just need to spend some time to understand how it all kind of works and goes together. The one thing that I'll bring back and talk about is the split, right? So boost time is pretty straightforward. You just choose, your amount of advance for at each of these RPM ranges, and they are configurable. You can configure the amount of boost you want at each RPM level. But then there's also a split setup, right? And what split does is control how the total boost is distributed between kind of these 2 stages that are in between, A and B and C. So you can think of these as like stage 1, stage 2, and then split is kind of the how the total boost is distributed between the two. So for split settings, you would set your boost to, right? There's you set your boost to whatever you like that degree of timing to be, that degree of forward adjustment, and then you'll set your split range, which is a number from 30 to 90, and the split kind of changes the ramp from the sort of stage 1 and 2 of the boost. So for example, if we had, say, 20 degrees of boost and our split was at 70, then at our first RPM, the ESC would target about 14 degrees of boost, and then it would ramp the last 6 degrees from your RPM 2 to RPM 3, or RPM 1 to RPM 3 range, right? So yeah, kind of clever how that kind of stuff works. I think it's something that we're going to have to play with on the track, see what we can do there. I think there's time to be made up with boost on the track if we can get it dialed into the right spots. Let's go now into turbo timing. For turbo timing, I don't have any timing configured at the moment. You see, you can set anywhere from 0 all the way up to 50 degrees of turbo timing, and then you can, of course, set your delay and ramp up and down rates. If I have turbo on, I usually have the down instant because I don't want the next time I hit the throttle to have turbo on. So that's what that's about. And then the blue number here will actually give you a readout live how much turbo is being applied. So if I was to actually have turbo on and go full bore, you would see the turbo number start to come up. In fact, we can test it. Might be a little bit loud, but we can turn down the audio in post. Let's give it 10 degrees of turbo timing. And let's make the delay very small and change the ramp there. All right, let's see what happens. You ready? Nothing. There's no turbo. Oh, because I bet you my radio is got the forward throttle is limited to 85. So let's see if we can get turbo with the throttle at 100. There we go. You saw that increment immediately. Very cool. And like I said, I don't run turbo in any case, unless it's a big track, a big straight. I need to get down fast. Most of the time, I'm in good shape. The next screen in settings is Hall angle. So Hall angle is like electronic timing advance, right? So the ESC can sort of advance the spark, if you will, of a brushless motor. It adds timing only in a chosen RPM window to gain top-end power and efficiency without making launch and corner exit soggy. So how it kind of works, right? Your RPM 0 is the start of the timing ramp. Obviously, anything below this range will have 0 timing added. So from 0 to 10K RPM, you'll have no Hall angle advancement. Your next RPM number is where the Hall angle gets dialed in. You can think of it as RPM 0 to RPM 1. The timing increases linearly from 0 to the Hall angle. and then at RPM 1 it stays at that value. Is kind of the way it works here. What it does on the track is if you increase the angle, you'll have more top speed and punch at high RPMs, but you get more heat and more current through the ESC, and it can feel edgy if it comes in too early. If you have less angle or later ramp, you get a lot of safer temperatures, a smoother drive, but little to no top end gain. You know, baseline, always 0. If you get temperatures okay, you might start to play with, you know, maybe 5 or 10 degrees. If it gets too jerky, bring it back. This is all a driver feel sort of thing, so you know, I don't want to give too much guidance here on purpose. You can figure out your Hall angle settings in the way you like them on your own track, with your own radio and your own feels, right? Next screen is drift. So drift sets a max RPM on the motor. You can use this to protect the drivetrain, for instance, in the air or on jumps. They say in the manual. I think that this basically just says, okay, once I hit this maximum RPM, drop it back 5K, and then I will, as I'm still in the throttle, I'll come back up to that max RPM, back it off 5K, and on and on. So basically you kind of fluctuate between, you know, whatever your max RPM number is, right? So if, say, I go like full on 60K, if I go full throttle, boost, all that stuff, it's going to max that RPM at 60, and it's going to drop it to 55K as soon as I hit that limit of 60. And then as I'm on the throttle still, it'll bring it back up to 60K. And then as it hits, it'll drop it another 5 to 55. So it's kind of, it'll always walk between 55 and 60 in this case. You can change the drop as well, you know, however you like. If you want it to say, when I hit the limit, I want to drop it down to 50K, you know, then you can do that. And then you'll bounce back and forth from 50 to 60K, which is probably not ideal, but, you know, it is a thing that you could do. So I'll set that back to off for now. And of course, the blue number is your current RPM. Next is your maintenance config. Now, we talked a little bit about this. This is cool stuff. worth the price of admission, I think here. And I'll mess with it a bit here, and we'll talk about kind of what the numbers work out to as we go here. The one thing to note is you can have silent alert, which basically means it'll show up when you go and look at the maintenance page. You can have an alert on, meaning it'll show up on the information screen, the front screen, as soon as the alert is hit. And those are your options there. Next, you can change what maintenance item you want to configure this for. So in this case, I want to say bearings. You can also choose tires, dampers, diffs, and then it has sort of an A, B, C, D, E, F, G that you can kind of use yourself. And these, I don't know if these are configurable, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We'll look at that as we go through the configuration here. So let's make this, I want to look at my bearings and this 500 distance. The distance is either minutes or runtime or distance covered. We have distance here, but you can choose either distance or minutes. I want to say 500 distance, right, is when I'm interested in changing my bearings, right? And what the distance number is basically 100,000 rotations of the motor is one distance unit. And 100,000 rotations of the motor is the distance, they say, is usually covered in approximately 1 5-minute race. So in this case, you know, with 1 5-minute race, let me go back to that distance setting. If I only wanted it to go every race, maybe I wanted to tell it, or every 2 races, maybe I could do that and say, hey, every time I run 4 distance measures, which is around 20 minutes of runtime, they say, that would be my 2 races, right? And I should probably go and change my bearings. But, you know, the number can be configured as high as 1,000. So, you know, you could think of that as, 5,000 minutes worth of runtime, and then you would replace your bearings. I'll leave this here for now. I've kind of shown you the other settings you can choose there and how you can set them. So that's your maintenance configuration. You can reset these as well, and I'll show you how to do that coming up. Next screen is your protection settings. Voltage warning, voltage cutoff, motor limit, and ESC. These are actually the defaults from the manufacturer. I did not change these. 3.6 volts is their warning out of the box, and 3.5 volts is their voltage cutoff out of the box. 3.6 volts basically puts you in limp mode, and you can get your car back to you, so you can take it off the track and get off before it actually cuts off at 3.5 volts, hopefully. The motor limit, I think this number is kind of high personally, because my understanding is that batteries, or rather magnets, can start to lose their strength when they're heated past 180 degrees Fahrenheit. 212 is higher than 180, so it worries me a little bit. But they say that's the number they like, so I'll just leave it for now until I need to change it to something else, right? If I burn up a motor, maybe that's time to fix it. But I think I'm going to let the wisdom of the Elceram guys run on this one. And again, the ESC limit is, the temp limit for that. I have actually bounced against this ESC temp limit without a fan on my ESC. That's why this fan is here. That almost necessary. These are all editable, as you see. Anything yellow is editable. And then next screen is the BEC. This is actually, well, this is one of the cooler things I think of what goes on here, is that the BEC is configurable all the way from, I think, 6 volts. Let's see. Yeah, 6 volts flat to 8.6, 8.4, and it's in 5/100 volt increments. I thought that was very cool. This is updated live and on the fly. If I had my fans plugged in, you'd hear them going up and down as I'm changing this. And it really is. It's live and on the fly. Pretty cool stuff. Next screen is your calibration for your radio. This is, like a first setup kind of screen, and then you probably never go back to it. They do give you some guidance to leave the sensor wire disconnected while you do your calibration. I won't show you my calibration, but it is as simple as, saying calibrate, and then holding full throttle and full brake. You're done. Simple stuff. Next is the profile, and you can actually set multiple profiles in this ESC. So you can have, say you have multiple tracks you go to, things like that. You can set up different things. Out of the box, they give you a training mode and a dirt mode, astro, carpet, so on, and they all have different settings under the covers. So this lets you very quickly change between settings profiles. So if I went to a different track, I wanted to have like a particular set of boost and turbo and Hall angle advancement and all those things like dialed in for this one track. I want to go to another track and I want to dial it in there too. I can set up a different profile here. I don't know how these are actually like broken down configurable yet. I'm going to have to mess with this one myself. I might be lying. I might be telling you a fib and it doesn't do anything that I'm talking about. I'll find out and we'll find out together. And then we go back to the throttle configuration. So that's that for the main configuration for, you know, kind of drive and things like that. But there's another menu that you can get to when you hold these buttons down for 4 seconds, like so. And you'll see this is our actually ESC configuration, right? So you can now inside of here change your motor poles. Now this thing will do motor of 2, 4, 6, or 8 pole motor. Batteries, I think it's 2 to 4S only on this ESC, but you can configure that here. My motor direction is reversed because my car is dumb, maybe. I don't know. It's a great car. I'm just playing. I do have a 5% dead zone on the ESC. Some people like a little bit higher or default a little bit higher, but 5% for me. And I think, yeah, you can see when I hit 1, 2. Yeah. Anyway, and then Safe RX is on. I don't know what that Safe RX setting does yet. I'm gonna have to learn. Next page is GUI customization. So this changes the main screen on the front there. The options that you kind of get are, you can see your throttle input, brake input, reverse, boost, turbo, Hall angle, drift, maintenance. These are all like where you get to as soon as you go to the options page. And, you know, we'll just leave it on throttle. Temperature units, keep, you know, your Fahrenheit or Celsius. I don't know why we don't all go to metric and be done, but whatever. Splash screen is the nice little Elceram wipe that comes on when you go. And the Blinky ID is Blinky. This is if you have no boost and no turbo settings. You're in Blinky mode, and that would be, you know, for like, you know, some tracks or races, they require you to not have any boost. They require you to have, you know, Blinky mode, right? And that's kind of the little bit that you can do on the GUI customization. Next is graphs. You can change the length of the recording for your graphs when you go back to the main screen, and you can change the upper limit for your RPM chart. I have updated this to 20 minutes and 60k RPM just to make sure I capture everything. It will auto reset after it doesn't have a radio for 10 seconds. And that's configurable as well. Next screen is voltage calibration. I haven't had to do any of this yet. Ideally, you won't have to, but if you know that your battery is really less than 15.66 volts, you know, adjust that here. Next screen is the same thing for temperature calibration, right? These thermometers. If there's a difference, now I have to kind of think about this one and look into this myself and understand how to set this, because you see that my ESC temperature is 87 degrees. I don't really think it's 87 degrees. If I can find a temp gun, I can tell for sure. We're a bunch of nitro guys. We gotta have a temp gun. Yeah. So right now, my ESC is, 89 degrees. And my motor temp is 82 degrees, 81 degrees. So maybe I need to figure out how to make my motor temp 81 degrees. Right? Yeah, it's actually 81. But I can't go that high? Let's see. How do we change that setting? Motor temperature is calibrated from the factory. Edit this number of recalibration is needed. See chapter below for details. Oh, and then the motor beta is specific to a motor and manufacturer. Let's see if we can find what the beta is for this motor. This is a Hobby Wing 4268, 2200 kV. I'm gonna have to find that one out. So we'll have to mess with that one. It's probably, there's a number there that will match. Okay. Next is your ammeter calibration. It's basically the calibration of the amp meter that's baked into the ESC. You shouldn't have to change anything here. We can get into that. Next screen is software version. Shows you the current firmware. These are installed from the factory, is my understanding. And if you wanted to have your ESC updated, my understanding is that you have to send them back to the factory. I don't know if it's strictly necessary. The software on this thing is pretty solid. I don't see any ports on this thing with which to do a firmware update, and there is no like sort of Bluetooth or, you know, connection to the ESC from a computer or a phone or something. So I'm not entirely sure how that would work. I'm going to have to find out, and we'll find out together too. Might reach out to the Elceram team and see what I can find. Last screen here is the credits screen. And these are the folks responsible for producing this thing. And so, you know, Jan, great software work there. Lukasz, he with the hardware is fantastic. I don't know what else to say. Now, Jan and I guess taking care of the rest is all you, the packaging and everything else. So good on you too, man. Nice work, team. It's a really nice ESC. It's a really smooth speed controller, and that it's so far so good. Last screen is, you know, sort of factory reset if you want to reset. And then this is just a kind of a snapshot of everything for the last 8 seconds. And then we can go back into the configuration mode. Kind of a wrap up. One thing I'll say is that I love that there's all of this data, right? So much data, histograms, graphs. The challenge I kind of see, though, is I can't do much with this data just looking at it. I mean, I can, right? Like, it's okay. I know where my sort of like full throttle inputs were and things like that. Yeah, okay. And those are, you know, like at these minutes or minute intervals and things like that, right? But there's not a lot of granularity here. There's not a lot of granularity here. And, you know, I don't have a sense for instance, if I'm driving the track, right? I don't have a sense for where on the track that full throttle correlates. If I could get the data off of this thing, I might be able to do something else with it, right? You know, if I had track data, you know, distance data, all kind of things like that, I might be able to figure out where on the track I was at, you know, full pin and where I wasn't and those kind of things. And that might help me make decisions better, you know, on track. So being able to get the data off of this would be ideal. And that would be the one biggest thing I would say to the Elceram team to include in the next go, right? Let me get the data off of this. Let me get the information, do things with it. I understand this is a first step towards that kind of thing. And I imagine somebody would probably hate to hear me say that. Because the truth of the matter is this is a very innovative ESC. It does a bunch of things that I've never seen before. It behaves better, in my estimation, than the other speed controllers that I've kind of run, and that's limited to only Hobbywing and Coyote, and this guy right here. I will say that this is the best driving ESC that I've driven or had experience with. So yeah, super nice work. I can't diminish it in any way, but I would love to get this data off like I want. Yeah. So that's the Elceram Oxide 1/8 scale ESC in my EB48 2.2 buggy. Fantastic ESC. I look forward to spending some more time understanding how everything all kind of works together, and as I play some more, I'll bring it back in and kind of talk about what I've learned in the intervening time. Yeah, that's all we have for this one. Make sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next.